Alicia Benton's phone lay face down near the edge of the gravel shoulder. The screen showed nothing. Inside her gray Toyota Camry, the center display was still awake. A small Bluetooth symbol remained in the upper corner. Below it, white letters filled the middle of the screen. Incoming call. Rachel Kemp Northlake. Compliance? Brent Halpern stood between Alicia's open driver door and his patrol cruiser. His electronic citation terminal was still in his left hand. Alicia could see the phone from where she stood. It was several feet away. The dashboard kept ringing. 8 minutes earlier, the phone had been sitting in the center console. Alicia was driving home from Northlake Assurance Group. An extended review meeting had run well past the normal workday. Her laptop was zipped inside a canvas tote on the passenger floor. A paper cup from the office cafeteria sat empty in the front cup holder. County Route 11 was the shorter way back to her apartment. The Camry was moving below the posted limit when red and blue lights appeared in the rearview mirror. Alicia signaled. She pulled onto the gravel shoulder. She shifted into park. She turned on the dome light. Her hands remained on the steering wheel while the patrol cruiser stopped behind her. The driver's window came down. Officer Brent Halpern approached from the rear. His flashlight crossed the back seat, the passenger seat, the tote on the floor, and then Alicia's face. License, registration, insurance. Alicia kept both hands visible. My license is in my wallet. The registration and insurance card are in the glove box. Halpern said nothing. Alicia waited. Can I get them? Go ahead. She removed the wallet first. Then she opened the glove box. The registration sat inside a clear plastic sleeve with the current insurance card behind it. She handed all 3 documents through the window. Halpern placed the flashlight under his arm and read the license. Alicia Benton. The photo matched. The address was in Port Haven, less than half an hour away. He looked at the license again. You live in Port Haven? Yes. What are you doing out here? Alicia looked through the windshield. County Route 11 continued straight through Hollis Ridge and connected to the highway several miles north. Driving home from work, Halpern held the license between 2 fingers. Work where? Northlake Assurance. What kind of work? Alicia paused before answering. Compliance. Halpern looked toward the passenger side of the car. The canvas tote remained closed on the floor. Her laptop was not visible. He returned his attention to the license. You usually come through Hollis Ridge this late? Alicia kept her hands on the wheel. Sometimes. A vehicle passed in the opposite lane. Its headlights moved across Halpern's uniform and disappeared behind the cruiser. He continued holding her documents. Alicia waited another few seconds. Officer, what was the reason for the stop? Halpern lowered the license. You touched the center line back there. Alicia looked at him. Where? About a quarter mile before I pulled out. Her hands stayed where they were. I didn't receive a lane warning. Halpern shifted the flashlight back toward her face. I'm telling you what I observed. Alicia did not answer that. The Camry had lane departure assistance. A small green lane icon was still illuminated on the instrument panel. She did not point at it. Halpern looked through the cabin again. Had anything to drink tonight? No. Prescription medication? No. Anything that would affect your driving? No. Halpern moved 1 step back from the window. He kept the 3 cards. Alicia glanced toward the cruiser. Its headlights lit the gravel behind her car. No other officer had arrived. No traffic hazard had been marked. Her car was fully on the shoulder. Halpern returned to his cruiser. He sat inside with Alicia's license, registration, and insurance card. Alicia remained in the Camry. The dashboard clock advanced. Her phone vibrated once in the center console. A Northlake email banner appeared briefly on the lock screen, then disappeared. She left the phone where it was. Several minutes passed. Halpern's driver door opened. He came back carrying her documents and the rectangular electronic citation terminal. He handed the registration and insurance card through the window. He kept the license. I need you to step out for a minute. Alicia looked at the license in his hand. Are you conducting a field sobriety test? I need you out of the vehicle. That wasn't my question. Halpern moved the citation terminal under his arm. I'm still completing the stop. Alicia looked at the empty shoulder in front of the Camry. Then she looked through the rearview mirror at the cruiser behind her. There was no second officer, no tow truck, no ambulance. Halpern still had her license. Alicia reached toward the door handle and stopped. My phone is in the center console. Halpern looked through the open window. The black phone sat beside the cup holders. The Bluetooth icon remained lit on the dashboard above it. Alicia placed both hands back on the steering wheel. "I'm telling you where it is before I move." Halpern waited beside the door. "Step out." Alicia looked once at the phone. Then she reached for the door handle. Alicia opened the driver door slowly, keeping one hand on the top edge. Halpern stood several feet away with her license still in his right hand and the electronic citation terminal resting against his left forearm. Before moving any farther, she looked toward the center console. "I'm picking up my phone before I step out." Halpern followed her line of sight through the open door. The black phone sat beside the cup holders exactly where Alicia had said it would be, and he didn't tell her to leave it inside. Alicia reached across the seat and picked up the phone. She stepped onto the gravel shoulder. She closed the driver door without locking it. Halpern pointed toward the front of the Camry. "Stand up there." She walked along the driver's side until she reached the front fender. Then she stopped beside the painted edge line. The travel lane remained several feet to her left. The Camry was immediately to her right, and neither Halpern nor his cruiser was blocked by where she stood. "Stay there." Alicia stayed there. Her phone rested in her right hand, with the screen still locked. Her left hand remained visible beside her jacket. Halpern moved closer to the front bumper and looked down at the citation terminal. "I'm going to finish checking a couple things." "With my license?" "Yes." Alicia glanced at the card he was still holding. She had already provided the registration and insurance card. Both had been returned, and she did not ask for the license again. Halpern began typing into the terminal. Alicia waited while his thumb moved across several fields on the screen. The device gave no indication she could see of what he was entering, and he did not explain whether he was preparing a warning, a citation, or simply recording the stop. She looked down at her phone. "I'm going to record the rest of this." Halpern stopped typing. "For what?" "For my record." Alicia unlocked the phone, opened the camera, and selected video. When the red recording control appeared, she pressed it once. She held the phone vertically at chest height. The timer started. Her elbow stayed against her side. Halpern remained several feet away. "You don't need to do that." Alicia kept the phone in the same position. "I'm going to keep recording." Halpern lowered the citation terminal slightly and looked at the screen of her phone before looking back at her. "This is already taking longer than it needs to." Alicia did not answer. A pickup truck passed in the travel lane, forcing Halpern to wait until the headlights cleared before speaking again. He pointed toward the gravel closer to the Camry. "Move another step toward the car." Alicia moved one step to her right. Her shoe stopped near the front tire. She left a bit more space between her and the roadway. She did not move toward Halpern. The phone stayed at the same height. He watched it for several seconds. "You need to keep that thing down." Alicia lowered the phone a few inches. The camera still faced forward. The recording timer kept running. Halpern shifted the terminal under his arm. "You're making this harder." Alicia looked at him. "What part of what I'm doing is interfering?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, Halpern looked toward the roadway, then at the front of the Camry, and finally back at the phone in Alicia's hand. "Officer safety." Alicia remained beside the tire. Nothing about her position had changed since he placed her there. "What do you need me to change?" "Keep the phone down." "It's below my shoulder. I can see where it is." Alicia waited for another instruction, but none came. Halpern stepped back toward his cruiser. "Just keep your hands where I can see them." Her left hand was already open beside her leg. Her right hand was holding the phone in front of her jacket, fully visible. She left both where they were. Halpern walked back to the cruiser and placed the citation terminal on the roof. He then reached through the open driver door. Alicia could not see what he was doing inside. She stayed by the Camry rather than move to keep him in frame. The camera continued recording the space between the two vehicles. A minute passed. Alicia shifted her weight once. Her feet stayed behind the painted line. When Halpern returned, he was carrying the citation terminal again. He stopped near the front bumper and looked first at Alicia, then at the phone. "You still recording?" "Yes." "I told you to keep it down." Alicia looked at her hand. The phone was still below shoulder level, where she had lowered it after his earlier instruction. She moved it another inch toward the center of her jacket. Halpern watched her do it. "Is this position unsafe?" "That's not the issue." "What is the issue?" "I'm trying to conduct a traffic stop." Alicia waited. He offered no additional instruction about her feet, hands, distance, or position relative to the roadway. Halpern looked down at the citation terminal again and resumed typing. Several seconds later, the device made a short confirmation tone. Alicia heard it. She did not ask what had been entered. The phone kept recording. Halpern looked up. "You've been asked to cooperate." Alicia kept her voice level. "I moved where you told me." "That's not what I'm talking about." She did not answer for him. Halpern walked 2 steps closer. He stopped far enough away that neither person had to shift to keep the same distance between them. The citation terminal remained in his left hand. Alicia's phone remained in her right. For several seconds, both devices were visible at the same time. Halpern's terminal showed the entry he'd just confirmed. Alicia's phone captured the interaction as it happened. She did not raise it. She did not step forward. She did not interrupt him. Halpern pointed toward the phone. "For now, keep that down." Alicia lowered her hand until the phone rested near the middle of her jacket. The camera angle dropped slightly, but still captured Halpern from the waist up. The recording continued. Halpern looked at the screen again. His eyes stayed there long enough for Alicia to notice. She remained beside the front tire. The painted edge line was still behind her left shoe. Halpern did not tell her she had moved too close. He did not tell her she was blocking traffic. He did not tell her to change where she stood. His next gesture was directed only at the phone. He pointed at it again. Alicia's phone was already resting against the middle of her jacket when Halpern pointed at it again. She did not lower it farther. The camera was angled slightly upward from her chest. Her right elbow stayed close to her side while Halpern stood near the front corner of the Camry with the citation terminal under his arm. Her left hand remained open beside her leg. Nothing about her position had changed. Halpern watched the phone for several seconds, then looked down at the terminal and pressed the screen twice. The same short confirmation tone Alicia had heard earlier sounded again. Then the small printer mounted near the bottom of the unit made a mechanical start. A narrow strip of paper began feeding out. Halpern tore it free. He read the first section before walking toward her, and Alicia kept the phone where it was, instead of raising it to follow his movement. When he reached the front fender, he held the paper out with her driver's license resting against it. "This is a written warning." Alicia took both. The license went into the card slot of her wallet. She folded the warning once and held it in her left hand. Halpern kept the terminal against his side. "The traffic part is done." The phone recorded the sentence. Alicia looked at the warning. It listed the vehicle information, the roadway stop, and the lane-related reason Halpern had given earlier. There was no fine due and no court appearance listed. She folded the paper again. "Am I free to go?" Halpern did not answer immediately. A vehicle passed behind him, and he waited until it cleared before turning his head toward the cruiser. His driver door was still open. The roof lights continued flashing against the rear glass of Alicia's Camry. Not yet. Alicia kept the warning in her left hand. "What am I being held for now? I need to finish dealing with this." Halpern pointed toward her phone. Alicia looked down at it, then back at him. The device remained below her shoulder. The recording timer was still running. "What did I do after you gave me the warning?" "That's not how this works." Alicia did not respond. Halpern stepped away from the front of the Camry and walked toward his cruiser. He did not take back the license. He did not take back the warning. He also did not tell Alicia that another traffic violation had occurred. She stayed beside the front tire because he had not released her. The phone remained recording. Halpern reached into the cruiser and picked up the radio microphone. Alicia could not hear the first part of his transmission over the passing traffic, but she heard her vehicle description and then the words, "still on scene." The microphone returned to its holder. Halpern stayed inside the open driver door for another minute, looking at the mounted computer. His right hand moved between the keyboard and the touchscreen, while Alicia remained where he had placed her. She did not move closer. She did not call anyone. She did not change the camera angle. When Halpern came back, he no longer had the citation terminal. Both of his hands were empty. Alicia held the folded warning between 2 fingers. "Is there another traffic issue?" "No." That answer also went into the recording. Halpern stopped several feet away. "I told you more than once to keep the phone down, and I lowered it. I'm aware of what I told you." Alicia waited. Halpern looked at the phone again, but this time, he did not order her to move it. Instead, he shifted the explanation. "When somebody keeps doing something during a stop after I tell them it's creating a safety concern, I have to deal with that before I clear the scene. Alicia did not raise her voice. What action am I doing now? Halpern looked toward the roadway. The phone remained against her jacket. Her feet remained beside the front tire. Her license was already back in her wallet. The warning was already in her hand. I'm not going to debate roadside procedure with you. Alicia nodded once. She asked nothing else. Halpern walked back toward the cruiser. He moved between the open driver door and the rear quarter panel for the next 2 minutes. Alicia stayed beside the Camry. Once, he looked toward her phone from beside the cruiser. Once, he checked the roadway before leaning back into the driver compartment. The warning did not leave Alicia's hand. A sedan slowed as it passed the emergency lights, then continued down the road. Halpern waited for the lane to clear before stepping back toward Alicia. You understand you need to remain here until I tell you otherwise? Yes. You understand that? I said yes. Halpern gave a short nod. There was no new instruction. Alicia shifted the folded warning from her left hand into the wallet that held her license. She returned the wallet to her coat pocket. She left the phone visible. Halpern looked at it again. He did not tell her it was too high. He did not tell her she was standing too close. He did not tell her she had entered the roadway. The explanation had moved somewhere else. Alicia watched him return to the cruiser and open the computer screen again. From her position, she could see movement on the display, but not the words. Another minute passed. The traffic warning had been completed. Her documents had been returned. Halpern had said there was no second traffic issue. Alicia remained on the shoulder. When Halpern came back, he carried a small notepad instead of the citation terminal. He opened it against his palm. What's the best phone number for you? Alicia looked at him. You already have my license information. I'm asking for a contact number. What is it for? Halpern held the pen above the page. Documentation. Alicia gave him the number. He wrote it down. The pen stayed on the paper after he finished. Are you planning to write another report? I'm documenting the stop. Alicia kept the phone against her jacket. What part? Halpern closed the notepad. The part we're still dealing with. He walked back toward the cruiser without naming an action. Alicia remained beside the front tire. The phone recorded the distance between them. The warning was already in her pocket. Halpern had already returned her license. He had already said the traffic part was done. The emergency lights remained on. Alicia had just been told again that she could not leave. Driver remains non-compliant, with repeated safety directions related to the recording device. Alicia heard Halpern say the sentence from beside his cruiser. She was still standing near the Camry's front tire. The traffic warning had already been folded into her wallet with her license, and the phone remained low against the center of her jacket. Halpern held the radio microphone close to his mouth. He looked through the open driver door at the computer mounted beside the steering wheel. A burst of static came back. Dispatch repeated enough of the information for Alicia to hear the word non-compliant a second time. Halpern answered with his unit number. He returned the microphone to its holder and leaned into the cruiser, where one hand moved across the keyboard for several seconds. Alicia stayed where she was because he had not yet told her to leave. The recording continued. When Halpern walked back toward the Camry, he carried neither the citation terminal nor the small notepad. His hands were empty, and his voice had returned to the same flat level he had used when he first approached her window. You can go now. Alicia looked at him. She did not move toward the driver door yet. What did you just document as non-compliant? Halpern stopped near the front bumper. I documented the safety issue during the stop. What action? We already covered that. Alicia held the phone where it was. She did not repeat the earlier questions about distance, traffic, or the position of her hands. Those answers were already on the recording. I want the reference number. Halpern looked toward the cruiser. For the traffic warning? For whatever you just added. He watched her for a moment, then walked back to the cruiser without answering. Alicia remained beside the Camry while another vehicle passed in the open lane. Less than a minute later, Halpern returned with a pen. Give me the warning. Alicia removed the folded paper from her wallet and held it out. Halpern did not unfold it. Instead, he turned the warning over and wrote an incident reference number across the blank space on the back. Beneath it, he added his last name and badge number. The pen stopped. Alicia looked at the writing before taking the paper back. Does that number include the non-compliance note? It references the stop. That wasn't my question. Halpern placed the cap on his pen. That's the number you'll need if you request anything. Alicia looked at the back of the warning again. A few minutes earlier, the sheet had done one job. It showed that the traffic issue had ended with a written warning and no additional citation. Now it pointed somewhere else. She folded it carefully along the same crease. Halpern stepped away. "You're clear to leave." Alicia walked to the driver door. The phone stayed in her right hand as she opened the car. The camera briefly caught the steering wheel, the center console, and the dark dashboard before she placed the device in the cup holder. She did not stop the recording. Halpern remained outside. Alicia sat down and closed the door. The Camry's screen woke when she pressed the ignition button. The phone automatically reconnected to the vehicle's Bluetooth system. The audio route changed. The recording continued. Through the windshield, Alicia could see Halpern standing beside his cruiser while he looked down at the computer again. He no longer needed her on the shoulder. She opened the warning. The front listed the ordinary traffic information: her name, the Camry, the location, the warning disposition. No fine, no required appearance. She turned it over. The handwritten incident number sat alone above Halpern's name. Alicia picked up the phone and spoke only enough to preserve what she could verify. She read the number aloud. Then she read the time displayed on the dashboard. She said nothing about why Halpern had chosen the word non-compliant. She did not describe what she thought he intended to do with it. Those parts were not hers to fill in. Outside, Halpern closed the cruiser door. The emergency lights stayed on while he returned to the driver's seat. Alicia waited until he pulled forward enough to clear the shoulder before signaling and merging back into the road. The phone remained connected to the Camry. For several miles, she did not touch it. At the next red light, she checked the recording screen. The elapsed time was still moving, so she pressed stop and waited for the file to finish saving before opening the video list. The new file appeared at the top. She did not play it. She checked that it had a duration. Then she locked the screen and placed the phone back in the console. The written warning remained on the passenger seat. Traffic moved again. Alicia drove. Nothing followed her physically from the roadside. No cruiser stayed behind her. No second vehicle appeared in the mirror. The incident number did. Back at the roadside, Halpern had already converted one part of the encounter into a phrase that could be repeated without showing the entire recording first. Non-compliant, with repeated safety directions. The phrase did not say that Alicia had moved when told. It did not say that she had lowered the phone. It did not say that both hands had remained visible. It did not say that Halpern had declared the traffic portion complete before keeping her there. Alicia did not know yet which of those details would appear in the full record. She only knew which word had entered first. By the time she reached the next intersection, the written warning had slid several inches across the passenger seat. Alicia caught it before it reached the floor and placed it inside the center console. The front of the page closed the traffic portion. The number written on the back opened another record. The intake screen already showed service concern when Alicia sat down across from the supervisor. She had given the clerk the incident reference number, her name, and the written warning less than 5 minutes earlier. The clerk entered the number and waited for the police record to load. Then he asked Alicia to sit beside a low counter until a supervisor became available. Now the same number appeared in the upper corner of another monitor. The supervisor introduced herself as Marlene Webb and pulled the keyboard closer. She wore a department identification card on a blue lanyard. She kept a legal pad beside the mouse, but had not written anything on it yet. "I understand you want to make a complaint about a traffic stop." Alicia placed the folded warning on the desk. "I want the department to review what happened after the traffic matter was completed." Marlene looked at the monitor instead of the warning. The screen was angled away from Alicia, but she could see enough of the layout to recognize Halpern's name near the top. Below it sat several lines of text and the same incident reference number written on the paper in front of her. Marlene scrolled once, then again. "What's the concern?" Alicia kept both hands beside the warning. "The officer told me the traffic portion was finished. He kept me there afterward and then described me over the radio as non-compliant with repeated safety directions." Marlene stopped scrolling. "Were you recording?" "Yes." "With your phone?" "Yes." Marlene looked back at the screen. Alicia waited. The legal pad remained blank. After several seconds, Marlene moved the cursor to a drop-down field and opened a list of complaint categories. Alicia could read only the lower half of the menu from where she sat. Marlene selected one. The screen changed. "Is this being entered as a conduct complaint?" Alicia asked. "It's being entered as a service concern for initial review." "What makes it a service concern?" Marlene leaned back slightly. "That's the appropriate intake category based on the information available right now." Alicia looked toward the monitor. "What information have you reviewed?" "The incident summary." "Anything else?" "Not yet." Alicia removed her phone from her purse, but left it locked on the desk. "I have the recording." Marlene glanced at the phone. "We don't take personal devices at this desk." "I'm not asking you to take it. I'm asking whether the recording is part of the information available before you classify the complaint." Marlene looked at the category field again. The cursor remained beside service concern. "The classification can be updated later if the review supports that." Alicia did not push the phone toward her. Instead, she picked up the warning and placed it beside the device. "Can you document that the recording was offered before the category was selected?" Marlene's hand stopped on the mouse. For the first time since Alicia sat down, Marlene reached for the legal pad. She wrote a short line. Then she opened a notes field on the screen. Alicia could hear the keyboard as Marlene typed. The process itself was ordinary enough. A person made a complaint. A department employee selected a category. A short explanation went into a box. Another unit would decide what happened next. The order was the part that mattered. Halpern's description had loaded first. The category came next. The recording still had not been opened. Marlene finished typing and turned the monitor several inches toward Alicia. The note was visible now. Complainant states personal phone recording available for review. Recording not reviewed at intake. Alicia read it twice. "Thank you." Marlene returned the screen to its original position. "I'll print the acknowledgement." The printer behind her started and stopped after a single sheet. While it worked, Alicia looked at the incident summary still open on the monitor. She could not read the full narrative from her chair, but one phrase was clear because it appeared in a bold summary field. Subject non-compliant, with repeated safety directions. The word subject had not been used at the roadside. Not by Halpern. Not by dispatch, where Alicia could hear it. Marlene stood, collected the printed sheet, and set it in front of Alicia. The complaint acknowledgement carried the incident reference number, the intake date, Marlene's employee identification, and the routing category. Service concern. Below that, a smaller line read, Initial basis. Dispute regarding officer directions. Recording during traffic contact. Alicia kept her finger on that line. My complaint is also about being held after he said the traffic matter was finished. Marlene looked at the acknowledgement. That can be included in the review. It isn't included in the basis. The basis field is abbreviated. Alicia slid the paper back across the desk. Then add it to the note. Marlene did not answer immediately. She sat down again, reopened the intake entry, and moved to the notes section. This time, Alicia could see the first note and a second empty line beneath it. Marlene typed, Complainant also disputes continued detention after officer stated traffic matter was complete. She saved the entry. A confirmation box appeared briefly, then disappeared. The first classification remained unchanged. Marlene printed a second acknowledgement and destroyed the earlier copy in a locked shred bin beside the desk. The new sheet carried the same category. Alicia read the added note before folding the page. When will the recording be requested? The reviewing unit will contact you if they need it. If? That's the normal process. Alicia placed the acknowledgement in her purse. She did not ask Marlene to decide whether Halpern had acted properly. That was not the authority sitting at this desk. Instead, she asked one final question. Which unit receives a service concern? Marlene gave her the name of the department's administrative review desk. Alicia wrote it on the bottom of the acknowledgement. Then she stood. No one stopped her from leaving the building. No officer followed her into the parking lot, and no radio call announced her departure. The restraint was no longer physical. Inside the intake system, the incident now had two descriptions attached to it. Halpern's summary said Alicia had been non-compliant with repeated safety directions. Alicia's intake note said the recording had been offered but not reviewed. It also said Halpern had continued the detention after stating the traffic matter was complete. Both entries existed. Only one of them had decided the category. Before Alicia reached the front door, Marlene clicked Submit for routing. The acknowledgement in Alicia's purse still said Service Concern. The recording had not been opened. Alicia opened the complaint portal from the link in her acknowledgement. She looked for a place to upload the recording. There was none. The page showed her name, the incident reference number, and the same category Marlene had selected at intake. Beneath Service Concern, a status field now read, Assigned for Administrative Review. Alicia scrolled through the page once, then returned to the top. There was a button for messages. There was a button for contact information. There was a link explaining how to request public records. No attachment control appeared anywhere. At the bottom of the page, a short instruction said that photographs, audio, and video would be accepted when requested by the assigned reviewer. Alicia read the sentence again. She opened the message field. A personal phone recording was offered at intake and noted in the complaint record. Please let me know how to submit that recording for review. She added one more sentence. Please also preserve all department audio, dispatch entries, report versions, and vehicle or body-worn recordings associated with the incident number. Alicia read the message before sending it. She removed 2 words that sounded like conclusions. She left only the records she wanted preserved. Then she clicked Submit. The portal generated a confirmation line beneath the message. Her request had been received. Nothing else changed. The status still said, Assigned for Administrative Review. 2 business days later, a response appeared. Alicia opened it during her lunch break and kept the phone flat beside her coffee while she read. Supporting media will be requested by the assigned reviewer if needed. Your preservation request has been added to the administrative file. There was no upload link. Alicia saved a copy of the message. She did not send another explanation of the roadside stop. The complaint record already contained her statement that Halpern had said the traffic matter was complete before keeping her there. It also contained Marlene's note that the recording had been offered and had not been reviewed. For the next several days, the portal remained unchanged. Alicia checked it before work, and once after dinner. She looked at the status, checked the message section, then closed the browser. The recording remained on her phone. She also copied the file to her home computer and placed a second copy on an external drive she used for tax documents and family photographs. The original file stayed untouched. She did not trim it. She did not add captions. She did not rename it with Halpern's name. The automatic file name remained. At the end of the week, the status changed. Alicia noticed it before she opened the new message. Initial review complete. Below that appeared a second line. Service response closed. She opened the disposition. The document was longer than the intake acknowledgement. It was shorter than a formal investigative finding. It said the administrative reviewer had examined the available department record concerning the traffic contact and found insufficient basis within the service review process to refer the matter for further conduct investigation. Alicia kept scrolling. The next section was labeled Materials Reviewed. She read each line. Officer Incident Summary. Dispatch Incident Entry. Traffic Warning Disposition. Complaint Intake Statement. Supervisor Routing Note. There was no personal recording listed. There was no notation that the recording had been unavailable. Alicia opened the earlier intake message in another browser tab. Marlene's note was still there. Complainant states personal phone recording available for review. Recording not reviewed at intake. She returned to the disposition. Near the bottom, the reviewer summarized the issue as a disagreement concerning officer safety directions and roadside communication during a traffic contact. The disposition said the available materials supported that Halpern had issued repeated safety-related directions and documented continued difficulty obtaining compliance. Alicia stopped scrolling. The phrase was not identical to Halpern's radio wording. It did the same job. She opened the portal message field. This time, she did not describe the stop. She asked 3 questions. Was the personal recording requested before this disposition was entered? Was the intake note stating that the recording was available reviewed? What is the procedure for requesting reconsideration with additional evidence? She sent the message. The answer arrived the next morning. The reviewer confirmed that the intake note had been part of the file. The personal recording had not been requested. The disposition had been based on the materials listed in the review document. Alicia read the response from top to bottom. Then she opened the final paragraph. A closed service response could not accept additional evidence through the original portal record. If Alicia wanted further consideration, she would need to submit a written reconsideration request within the department's stated review period. Any media she wanted considered could be identified in that request. It would be collected separately if reconsideration was accepted. The original complaint page was now read-only. Alicia tested the message box. It had disappeared. The category remained visible. Service concern. The status remained visible. Closed. Alicia printed the disposition, the intake note, and the reviewer's response. She placed the pages in chronological order on her kitchen table without marking them. The first page said the recording existed. The second showed the complaint had been routed. The third listed what the reviewer had examined. The fourth confirmed the recording had not been requested. Alicia opened a blank document on her laptop. At the top, she typed the incident reference number and the words, "Request for reconsideration." She did not start with an accusation. She started with the sequence. The traffic warning was completed. Halpern said the traffic portion was done. Her documents were returned. She was told she could not leave. The phone recording was offered at intake. The administrative reviewer knew the file existed. The service response was closed without requesting it. Alicia stopped typing after the last sentence. She saved the document. Before closing the laptop, she opened the original video folder one more time. The roadside recording was still there, with the same automatic file name and the same duration it had shown when she first checked it. The department had closed its review. It had never opened the file. The evidence receipt carried the same automatic file name Alicia had preserved on her phone. Beneath it, the department portal showed 3 short entries. Original media file, received for reconsideration. No modification detected after upload. Alicia saved the receipt as a PDF and placed it in the folder with the closed service response. The reconsideration request had been accepted that morning. The notice was narrow. It did not withdraw the original disposition, and it did not change the complaint category. It authorized the reviewer to examine the recording and any department records needed to evaluate the new evidence. For the first time, the file itself was inside the review system. Alicia did not submit a new description of Halpern. She uploaded the original recording, the earlier acknowledgement showing that the recording had been offered at intake, and a one-page chronology containing only actions she could tie to the video or department paperwork. The chronology ended with 4 lines. Halpern returned the traffic documents. Halpern stated that the traffic portion was complete. Alicia remained at the location after being told she could not leave. The later department record described her as non-compliant, with repeated safety directions. She submitted the page without adding a conclusion. Across the department's administrative network, the assigned reviewer opened the new evidence entry beside the existing service file. The original disposition remained visible in the left panel. The reconsideration material appeared on the right. That layout mattered because the system did not replace an old document when a new one arrived. It kept both. The reviewer opened Alicia's recording first. The file began during the traffic contact. It continued through the period after Halpern returned her documents. The reviewer did not need the entire recording to locate the disputed sequence because Alicia had included approximate points in the file. Halpern's voice marked the end of the traffic portion. Alicia remained beside the vehicle. The recording continued. Halpern gave another direction. Alicia answered. A later radio transmission used the word non-compliant. The reviewer paused playback and opened the incident report. The summary in Alicia's complaint intake used a phrase she already knew from the closed service response. Subject non-compliant, with repeated safety directions. The full narrative was longer. It described the traffic reason and Halpern's contact with Alicia. It also covered the later roadside exchange. It also said Alicia kept asking why she had to wait after the warning was finished. The reviewer moved to the report information panel. Most employees never saw that screen unless they had a reason to check authorship or changes. It listed creation time, author, saved versions, and later modifications. Those entries did not change the report ordinary users could see. There were 2 narrative saves. The reviewer opened the earlier one. The first version documented the traffic warning and Alicia's questions after her documents were returned. It said Halpern stayed at the scene while explaining officer safety expectations. It did not call Alicia non-compliant. The reviewer went back to the change panel. The second version had been saved later that same afternoon under Halpern's employee account. Several sentences were expanded. One sentence had been added near the end. Subject remained non-compliant with repeated safety directions and required continued scene management. The reviewer placed the two versions side by side. Nothing in the system showed another roadside event between them. The encounter was already over before either narrative had been saved. That fact alone did not make the later version improper. Officers routinely completed reports after leaving a scene, and they could correct or expand narratives before final submission. The change history still created a new question. The wording used to classify Alicia during complaint intake had not been present in the first saved account. The reviewer returned to the recording. The reviewer didn't start from the beginning. The reviewer examined the portion between Halpern returning the documents and the radio transmission. Alicia stayed near her vehicle. Her phone remained in her hand. She asked why she still could not leave. Halpern answered with officer safety language. The recording captured no second traffic violation. It captured no attempt to drive away. It captured no movement toward Halpern. The reviewer stopped the file after the radio call. Then the reviewer opened the original materials reviewed list from the closed service response. Officer Incident Summary. Dispatch Incident Entry. Traffic Warning Disposition. Complaint Intake Statement. Supervisor Routing Note. The report version history was not listed. Neither was Alicia's recording. A separate tab showed Marlene's intake note. Complainant states personal phone recording available for review. Recording not reviewed at intake. The reviewer left that tab open. Alicia received no decision that afternoon. Instead, another portal notification appeared shortly before the end of the business day. Reconsideration review active. Below it, the evidence index now contained the phone recording and a new department entry. Report version history added for review. Alicia looked at the second line for several seconds. She had asked to preserve report versions in her first written message, yet no version history had appeared in the closed service response. Now it did. She downloaded the updated evidence index and filed it beside the original disposition. She still did not know what the reviewer would decide. Halpern's finalized narrative remained the active police report. The service response remained closed on the original complaint page. Nothing had been corrected, but the reconsideration file now contained two versions of the report instead of one summary. The earliest version described questions after the warning. The later version added the phrase non-compliant with repeated safety directions. For several days, that phrase had looked like the department's starting fact. The version history showed when it had become one. The reconsideration interview notice blocked 90 minutes on Alicia's calendar. It listed the incident reference number, the existing service concern classification, and a short statement explaining that the interview would address only information relevant to reconsideration of the closed service response. Alicia arrived with no new statement. She carried a folder with the acknowledgement, the closed disposition, and the evidence receipt. It showed her original recording had finally entered the department system. Her phone stayed in her purse because the reviewer already had the file. The interview room held a monitor, a small speaker, and a yellow legal pad. A printed worksheet rested beside the keyboard. The reviewer checked Alicia's identification, opened the reconsideration file, and explained the scope. This is not a new complaint investigation. I'm reviewing whether the additional evidence changes the original service disposition. Alicia looked at the worksheet. Does that include why I was kept there after the warning? If the recording affects that issue, yes. The reviewer started the file several minutes before Halpern returned Alicia's license and warning. Alicia watched the screen without explaining what was coming next. Halpern's voice came through the speaker. He completed the warning. He returned the documents. Then the recording captured the sentence that had been sitting in Alicia's written chronology for days. The traffic part is done. The reviewer entered a marker on the worksheet. Traffic enforcement completed. Playback continued. Alicia asked whether she was free to go. Not yet. Another marker. The reviewer kept the video moving at normal speed, while Alicia remained beside the Camry. Halpern referred back to the phone and to safety concerns. He walked between Alicia's vehicle and the cruiser, and later told her to remain where she was until released. Alicia answered yes. The reviewer entered another marker. Direction to remain at location, acknowledged. The recording moved forward. Halpern later asked for Alicia's contact number and described the additional work as documentation. After that came the radio transmission. Driver remains non-compliant with repeated safety directions related to the recording device. The reviewer stopped playback. The worksheet had several columns. Event. Source. Direction given. Response observed. The first marked instruction after the warning showed Alicia acknowledging that she would remain. The next row contained the radio characterization. Its direction given column was empty. The reviewer opened Halpern's finalized narrative in a second window. Alicia could see only part of the screen, but she recognized the sentence because it had already appeared in the reconsideration material. Subject remained non-compliant with repeated safety directions and required continued scene management. The reviewer returned to the recording. Do you recall an instruction in this section that you did not follow? Alicia kept her eyes on the playback bar. Mark the one you hear. The reviewer waited. Alicia said nothing else. The file played again from the traffic completion marker to the radio transmission. Halpern referred to earlier instructions about the phone. He said he had told Alicia more than once to keep it down. The recording showed the phone already resting near the center of her jacket. He did not direct her to lower it again before the radio characterization. He did direct her to remain. She remained. The reviewer paused the file a second time and entered another note. The wording was short. No additional device position command identified in interval. That was not a finding. It did not say Halpern had acted improperly, and it did not remove the service category. It only described what the reviewer could locate in the recording. The distinction mattered because the department's reconsideration rule allowed the reviewer to evaluate new evidence against the original disposition. Broader conduct findings required a separate referral decision. The old category was still controlling the outcome. The reviewer opened the earliest saved report version next. The first version described Alicia questioning the continued detention and Halpern maintaining the scene while explaining safety expectations. It did not contain the later sentence calling her non-compliant. The finalized version did. Alicia watched the reviewer move between the two documents without commenting. The worksheet gained another row. Later narrative language absent in the first saved version. The reviewer looked at Alicia. Did the officer tell you at any point after returning your documents that recording itself was prohibited? No. Did you stop recording? No. Did he order you to? Not after the warning. The reviewer wrote that answer down. The interview continued through the release point. Halpern eventually told Alicia she could leave, wrote the incident reference number on the warning, and returned to his cruiser. Nothing in that portion required a second viewing. The reviewer stopped the file. Alicia had been in the room for more than an hour. The worksheet now contained a sequence the first service response had never contained in one place. It listed traffic completion, continued detention, acknowledged location instruction, radio characterization, and later report wording. The adverse record still existed. The original service closure still existed. Alicia folded her copy of the interview notice and put it back into the folder. Is the worksheet part of the reconsideration file? Yes. I'd like the record to show that I asked. The reviewer added a short note and saved the worksheet. A confirmation message appeared on the monitor. Alicia stood. She had spent another morning inside the same incident, even though the original traffic matter had ended with a warning and no required court appearance. The department had now seen the recording. That did not give her the time back. It did not change the category before she left the room. It did not remove Halpern's wording from the active report. After Alicia walked out, the reviewer reopened the worksheet. The row beside Halpern's radio statement still had an empty field under direction given. The reviewer opened a new internal form. At the top was a single line. Clarification requested from reporting officer. The cursor moved into the first question. Identify the specific direction not followed after the traffic warning was completed. The reviewer stopped typing there. The clarification form came back with one paragraph under Halpern's name. The reviewer opened it beside the marker sheet from Alicia's interview. The original question remained at the top. Identify the specific direction not followed after the traffic warning was completed. Halpern did not identify one. His response said Alicia had continued questioning his instructions, maintained an active recording posture, and required additional attention while he completed scene documentation. He described the issue as a continuing pattern rather than a single refusal. That last sentence broadened his explanation. My assessment was based on her overall conduct during the contact and on the need to keep the roadside under control. The reviewer read the paragraph twice. Then the recording marker sheet came back onto the screen. Traffic enforcement completed. Direction to remain at location acknowledged. No additional device position command identified in interval. Radio characterization. Non-compliant with repeated safety directions. Those entries had not changed. The clarification changed something else. Halpern was no longer tying the adverse description to a specific post-warning instruction. He was tying it to the encounter as a whole. That distinction had not appeared in the finalized report. The reviewer opened the earliest saved narrative and the later version again. This time, the reviewer did not compare individual sentences. The reviewer looked at the report approval fields. The first narrative had been saved after the roadside contact ended. The expanded narrative had been saved later. Halpern's clarification came much later. The department had already closed Alicia's original service complaint and reopened it through reconsideration. 3 records now describe the same issue in 3 different ways. The earliest report described questions and continued scene management. The finalized report described repeated non-compliance. The clarification described the totality of Alicia's conduct. The reviewer entered a note into the reconsideration file. Clarification does not identify a discrete post-warning direction that was refused. Officer states, characterization reflected cumulative scene management assessment. The note did not decide the case. It did require a supervisory review. The reconsideration question had moved beyond whether the recording existed. The department now had to decide whether an adverse service disposition could remain supported by a broader explanation. That explanation went beyond what the original review materials had shown. The file moved upstairs electronically. Alicia saw only the status change. Supervisory review pending. There was no name beside it. She downloaded the status page and returned to work. The closed service response remained in the same folder on her laptop, and the words "service concern" still appeared near the top of the portal whenever she opened the incident. 2 business days passed. The next notice arrived while Alicia was on her lunch break. It was a 4-page reconsideration memorandum. She opened the first page on her phone. Reconsideration disposition. Original service finding affirmed. Alicia did not scroll immediately. She set the phone beside her paper cup, finished the line she was reading on a work schedule, then opened the memorandum again. The supervisory explanation acknowledged that the personal recording had not been reviewed during the initial service process. It acknowledged the report version history. It also acknowledged that Halpern's clarification did not identify a separate post-warning command that Alicia had expressly refused. The memorandum still retained the original disposition. The reason appeared halfway down the second page. The supervisor wrote that field contacts could involve a series of instructions, safety judgments, and behavioral observations that were not always reducible to a single command. Because Halpern had described Alicia's continued questioning and recording activity as requiring additional scene management, the supervisor concluded that the service response did not need to be changed. The standard had shifted. The original report said repeated safety directions. The clarification request asked which direction Alicia failed to follow. The answer supplied none. The supervisory memorandum now said a specific direction was not necessary to sustain the service disposition. Alicia scrolled farther. Near the bottom was a separate paragraph. The discrepancy between narrative versions and the precision of the terminology used in the finalized incident report will be forwarded for internal documentation review. This referral does not alter the service disposition addressed here. She read that paragraph again. The wording that had helped sustain the original complaint closure was now uncertain enough to require another internal review. The closure still stood. Alicia saved the memorandum. She did not call the department. She did not write a response from the break room. After work, she opened the portal from home and used the correspondence field to submit one sentence. Please provide the written policy or review standard that supports affirming the disposition when there is no identified post-warning direction that was not followed. She sent it and saved the confirmation. The portal returned an automatic message. It said, completed reconsideration decisions were final within the service review track, unless a separate internal process produced information requiring administrative correction. That language gave Alicia another piece of the process. The service track was finished. The documentation track was not. The department had separated them. One process would decide whether the officer's wording needed review. The other process had already decided that the same wording did not need to be removed from Alicia's service outcome. The next morning, the reconsideration reviewer opened the supervisory memorandum and completed the file routing. One field required a disposition code. Affirmed. A second field asked whether related internal action existed. The reviewer selected yes. A third field opened. Documentation. Consistency referral. The system generated two records from the same contradiction. One kept Alicia's adverse service disposition in place. The other preserved the question of how the language supporting it had been written. The reviewer submitted both. After submission, the fields locked. The first row on the documentation worksheet did not contain Alicia Benton's name. It contained a system event. Traffic warning closed. The documentation reviewer had asked a records analyst to build the chronology from system timestamps rather than from anyone's narrative. That changed the order of the work. Instead of starting with Brent Halpern's finalized report and checking other sources against it, they started with actions the department's own software had already dated. The warning had been completed first. The roadside recording then captured Halpern returning Alicia's documents and saying the traffic portion was done. A later marker showed the radio transmission describing her as non-compliant. After that came her release. Only when those events were fixed did the analyst add the report history. The first narrative save occurred after Alicia had driven away. The second save occurred later that afternoon. That second save added the sentence describing her as remaining non-compliant with repeated safety directions and requiring continued scene management. The analyst placed both entries on the worksheet and did not highlight either one. The reviewer read down the page. Traffic warning closed. Traffic completion statement. Continued detention. Radio characterization. Release. First narrative save. Second narrative save. The sequence itself did not prove that an edit was improper. Officers completed reports after calls every day, and a later save could contain corrections, fuller detail, or information remembered after returning to a workstation. The question was narrower. What supported the added language? The reviewer opened the report change panel and compared the two saved versions. Several edits were routine. A vehicle description had been expanded. One location reference had been made more precise. A sentence about the warning had been cleaned up. The non-compliant sentence stood out because it added a behavioral classification. The analyst opened the department's incident audio index and checked whether a new transmission, dispatch note, or supervisor message had entered the record between the two report saves. None had. No later witness statement appeared. No additional roadside event existed because the stop was already over. No new complaint had been received. The reviewer added a line to the worksheet. No new event source identified between narrative versions, supporting added behavioral terminology. That was still not a misconduct finding. It was a record statement. The reviewer moved next to Halpern's clarification response from reconsideration. That response had been written much later, after Alicia's recording was inside the review system, and after the marker sheet had failed to identify a post-warning direction she refused. The phrase repeated safety directions was reframed as totality of her conduct. The reviewer placed both phrases in separate columns. Then came the supervisory memorandum. That document acknowledged the missing specific command, but affirmed the service disposition using the broader totality standard. A third column was added. Finalized report. Repeated safety directions. Officer clarification. Cumulative conduct and scene management concerns. Supervisory memorandum. Totality of encounter. Specific refusal not required. The records analyst stopped typing. The reviewer read all three entries before asking for the audit history of the reconsideration file. That history did not show what anyone thought. It showed what they opened. The reviewer could see when the personal recording entered the system. The reviewer could see when report version history was added. The reviewer could see when the clarification request went to Halpern. The reviewer could see when his response returned. The reviewer could also see when the supervisory reconsideration memorandum was approved. One item remained outside the chronology. Alicia's original intake note. The analyst added it. Personal phone recording available. Recording not reviewed at intake. Its timestamp came before the first service closure. The worksheet now covered more than the roadside contact. The department knew the recording existed before closing the first review. The recording later showed the completion point and the directions Alicia actually followed. Version history showed when stronger terminology entered the report. The clarification did not supply the missing post-warning refusal. The supervisory memorandum retained the outcome using a broader standard. The documentation reviewer did not call Alicia. There was nothing she needed to clarify about those timestamps. At Northlake Assurance, Alicia spent the afternoon reviewing exception reports for a commercial claims team. Her department tracked every material change to regulated files, including who changed a field and when the change became effective. Near the end of the day, she received a short department notice. Documentation review remains active. No response required from complainant at this time. She saved it and returned to work. That was all. Inside the Hollis Ridge Police Department, the reviewer moved to the next section of the worksheet. Prior knowledge. The first question concerned Halpern. Had information available before the second report save contradicted the added language? The second concerned the initial service review. Had the department already been told that a direct recording existed before the first disposition? The answer to the second question was already in the system. Yes. The reviewer marked the intake note as the source. The first question required more care. The recording captured Halpern at the scene. He knew when he returned the warning. He knew Alicia remained where directed. He knew what he transmitted over the radio. The reviewer did not write that he knew his later description was inaccurate. The records could not establish that conclusion by themselves. Instead, the reviewer wrote, the reporting officer was aware of the post-warning interaction before both narrative saves. That sentence stayed inside the boundaries of the record. The next field concerned supervisory knowledge. The reviewer opened the audit history for the reconsideration case. A small table listed documents accessed before the supervisory memorandum was approved. Alicia's recording, the marker worksheet, Halpern's clarification, the report version history, the intake note. All five showed access entries before the memorandum's approval time. The reviewer leaned closer to the monitor and checked the dates again. The decision had come after the evidence. The analyst added the final chronology row. A supervisory affirmation approved after reviewers accessed contradicting sources. The service disposition still read affirmed. No correction had posted to Alicia's portal. Halpern's finalized incident narrative remained active, but the documentation file now contained a sequence that no later explanation could change without creating another timestamp. The reviewer saved the worksheet. Then a new request was routed to the supervisory chain. It contained no accusation, only one question. Identify the factual basis for retaining the adverse service disposition after review of the recording, version history, and officer clarification. The request status changed to response required. The chronology stayed attached. The review supervisor left the factual basis request open on his screen while he moved two other case files into a separate queue. The question was short. It did not ask whether Alicia Benton had been easy to deal with. It did not ask whether Brent Halpern had preferred fewer questions during the roadside contact. It asked what factual basis supported the adverse service disposition after the recording, report history, and clarification had already been reviewed. The supervisor answered the next morning. His response was longer than the question. He wrote that the department's service concern category was an administrative service review disposition. It was not a formal finding that a complainant had violated a law or had refused a particular command. He cited the department section covering professional interaction, scene management, and officer discretion during traffic contacts. The cited section allowed officers to manage positioning, communication, and safety during an active roadside encounter. It did not define noncompliant. It did not say that recording an officer was itself a failure to cooperate. It did not create a separate standard for a person who continued asking questions after receiving a warning. The supervisor did not claim that it did. Instead, he wrote that the service finding could remain based on the overall management demands of the contact, even if no single post-warning refusal could be isolated from the recording. The documentation reviewer attached the response to the chronology file. Then the reviewer added Alicia's unanswered policy request from the service portal. That request had asked for the written standard supporting affirmation without an identified post-warning direction she had failed to follow. The department's customer response unit finally answered it that afternoon. The response cited the same general scene management section. A second paragraph added something the earlier service letters had not said. A service concern disposition does not constitute a finding that the involved person violated a specific direction or departmental rule. Alicia read the sentence at her desk at North Lake Assurance. Her commercial claims screen remained open behind the message. The department was now saying the service concern category did not require a finding that she had refused a specific direction. The incident report still described her as non-compliant with repeated safety directions. Those were not the same statement. Alicia downloaded the response and saved it with the other records. She did not write another explanation of the traffic stop. She sent one request. Please preserve this response with the documentation review. The acknowledgement arrived several minutes later. It said the correspondence had been linked. Inside the police department, the documentation reviewer now had a narrower problem than the one that had started the reconsideration. The service disposition could be defended as a broad administrative judgment. The report language still required a factual source. The reviewer sent Halpern a terminology request. It quoted only one sentence from his finalized report. Subject remained non-compliant with repeated safety directions and required continued scene management. Below it were two questions. Does non-compliant refer to a specific direction that was not followed? If not, identify the observable conduct the term was intended to describe. Halpern returned the form before the end of his shift. He did not identify a refused command. He wrote that Alicia continued asking why the contact was being extended, kept her phone positioned to record, and remained engaged with him while he completed the roadside interaction. He said he had used non-compliant as a summary term for what he considered continued scene management difficulty. Then he added one sentence. If documenting the contact today, continued questioning during scene closure would be more precise. The reviewer did not interpret the sentence. The reviewer entered it. That phrase had moved through the initial service closure, the reconsideration process, and the supervisory affirmation. The officer who wrote it described it differently. Not false, not withdrawn, more precise. That distinction mattered because the department's records use different kinds of language for different purposes. A behavioral term in an incident report could be read later without the service review correspondence sitting beside it. The reviewer opened the documentation standards page. One section required material behavioral descriptions to be supported by observable conduct contained in the report or associated record. Another required corrections when wording could materially overstate what the source record established. Neither section required the reviewer to decide what Halpern had intended. The question was, what the records supported. The reviewer placed Halpern's new response beside the marker summary. The recording showed Alicia acknowledging the direction to remain where she was. It showed her continuing to ask why she was still being held. It showed her recording. It did not contain the identified repeated refusals suggested by the finalized wording. The reviewer sent one more question, this time to the supervisor who had affirmed the service concern disposition. Would the service disposition remain the same if the phrase non-compliant with repeated safety directions were removed from the incident narrative? The answer came back within an hour. Yes. The disposition rests on the overall contact, not on that phrase alone. That response protected the service decision. It also separated the service decision from the sentence that had helped carry the matter through the earlier reviews. The reviewer saved both responses. Alicia did not receive them that day. Her portal still showed affirmed. Nothing on the public-facing screen had moved. The internal file had. The next step belonged to documentation review, because the department had now put in writing that the service outcome did not require a specific refused direction, while Halpern had put in writing that he would no longer describe the observed conduct the same way. Before closing the worksheet for the evening, the reviewer opened the certification field for the finalized incident narrative. The field asked whether the disputed behavioral terminology remained supported as written. No selection had been made. The reviewer left it that way. For the first time, The unresolved part of Alicia's record was no longer whether she had proved what happened. It was whether someone inside the department would certify the words already written about her. I can certify the approval. I can't certify the contact. Colby Sayers kept the incident report open on the left side of his monitor. The documentation form sat on the right. The reviewer had asked him one question. His employee approval appeared on Brent Halpern's finalized narrative. The report contained the sentence describing Alicia Benton as non-compliant with repeated safety directions. Did Sayers's approval mean he could certify that description as factually supported? Sayers read the sentence again before answering. He had not been on County Route 11. He had not heard the roadside exchange when it happened. He had not watched Alicia's phone recording before approving the report. That night, his role was supervisory review. He was reviewing a completed traffic contact report submitted by an officer under his command. That was what he could confirm. The reviewer turned the certification form toward him. Did Halpern report a separate safety incident to you before submitting the narrative? No. Did you direct him to add the non-compliance language? No. Did you independently verify that language before approval? Sayers looked at the report. No. The answers were entered without interpretation. Sayers did not withdraw his original approval. The system did not allow a supervisor simply to erase a prior approval from an already finalized incident record. A correction required a separate entry, a stated basis, and a new approval path. The reviewer asked one last question. Can you certify the disputed wording as supported by your own knowledge? Sayers moved his hand away from the mouse. No. The reviewer saved the interview note. Nothing happened to Alicia's public-facing file that afternoon. The service concerned still read affirmed. Halpern's finalized report still carried the same sentence. The difference existed inside the documentation review. One of the department's own supervisors had now separated three things that had previously traveled together: approving an officer's report, witnessing the underlying event, and certifying a disputed factual description. They were not the same act. The reviewer opened Halpern's terminology response from the day before. If documenting the contact today, continued questioning during scene closure would be more precise. That statement now sat beside Sayers's refusal to certify the original wording from personal knowledge. The service supervisor's earlier response sat below both. The disposition rests on the overall contact, not on that phrase alone. The reviewer no longer needed to decide whether removing the sentence would collapse the service-concerned disposition. The service supervisor had already answered that. It would not. That removed one reason for leaving the sentence untouched. The documentation standard required something narrower. Behavioral descriptors had to match observable actions in the source record. If later review showed the wording overstated what the sources supported, reviewers could start a correction process. They would not have to reopen every other administrative decision tied to the incident. The reviewer opened the certification field. The menu contained three choices: supported as written, supported with clarification, not supported as written. The reviewer did not select one immediately. A separate tab held the relevant materials, but there was no need to replay the entire roadside recording again. The marker summary already identified the instructions Alicia acknowledged. The report history already showed when stronger terminology entered the narrative. Halpern's own later response already provided the wording he said would be more precise. Sayers had now defined the limit of his approval. The reviewer selected the third option, not supported as written. A text box opened beneath it. The reviewer entered a short basis. Available source records do not identify repeated post-warning safety directions that were refused. Reporting officer later identified continued questioning during scene closure as more precise. Original approving supervisor cannot independently certify disputed behavioral terminology. The reviewer read the entry once, then saved it. The status changed from documentation review active to correction recommended administrative disposition required. That status did not correct Alicia's record yet. It did something more limited. It moved the question away from the people who had written, approved, and defended the original wording. The next decision would have to address the documentation finding itself. Alicia received only a generic notice near the end of her workday. Northlake's office had mostly cleared by then. A cleaning cart stood near the conference rooms, and the printer beside Alicia's desk had gone into sleep mode. Her phone showed one new message from the Hollis Ridge portal. Documentation review completed. Administrative disposition pending. There was no finding attached. Alicia opened the message once, then saved the notice to the folder she had been maintaining since the stop. She did not call the department. She did not send another summary. Her last written request had already been answered, preserved, and attached to the internal review. The next morning, the documentation reviewer completed the transfer package. The package did not contain a narrative accusing Halpern of dishonesty. It did not make a finding about his motive. It did not call Sayers's earlier approval improper. It listed records. Original narrative. Finalized narrative. Personal recording preservation entry. Marker summary. Halpern clarification. Supervisory reconsideration memorandum. Policy response. Audit access history. Sayers certification note. Documentation finding. The reviewer placed a short cover sheet on top. Issue for administrative disposition. Whether the incident narrative requires correction based on documentation finding and whether related service records require conforming action. Before submitting the package, the reviewer checked one field. Original service chain may modify final disposition? The system answer was no. The finding had crossed the threshold for review outside the chain that produced the affirmed service response. The reviewer submitted the transfer. The case number stayed the same. The authority attached to it did not. The administrative transfer package opened with 3 records placed in date order. Marianne Holt did not begin with Brent Halpern's latest explanation. She began with what existed first. The initial incident report sat on the left side of her desk. The Northlake Assurance Call transcript was in the middle. Halpern's later safety supplement rested on the right, behind a copy of the traffic contact policy that had been active on the night Alicia Benton was stopped. Marianne opened a blank comparison memorandum on her monitor. The first heading read, Contemporaneous Record. The second read, Later Explanation. The third read, Observable Support. She started with Halpern's original report. The narrative said, Alicia continued using a recording device after a safety instruction. It said she interfered with completion of the stop. It did not say she stepped toward Halpern. It did not say she entered the travel lane, touched him, blocked access to his equipment, or left the position where he had directed her to stand. Marianne entered those omissions as separate lines. They were simply things the report did not describe. The Northlake transcript came next. Rachel Kemp's call had connected after Alicia's phone was already damaged, but before the traffic stop was cleared. The automated compliance notice had played through the Camry speakers, and Halpern's voice appeared later in the recorded call. I already told you that recording had to stop. Marianne copied that sentence into the memorandum. She added the call timestamp beside it. The wording mattered because it existed before the complaint or liability claim, and before anyone had asked Halpern which physical act created the safety issue. The later supplement used different language. It said Alicia had moved the phone toward the officer's working space. Marianne read the entire paragraph. No distance was listed. No contact was described. No change in Alicia's body position was identified. The supplement did not say she stepped closer after being told to remain beside the car. It did not identify an object she blocked or a movement Halpern could not complete because of the phone. Marianne checked the submission date. The supplement had been created after Alicia filed the civilian complaint. She entered that date into the second column. The policy was entered below. It allowed an officer to control distance, traffic exposure, and access to a working area during a stop. It also allowed intervention when conduct materially interfered with an officer's task. The policy did not classify civilian recording itself as interference. That distinction already appeared elsewhere in the file, but putting it into a formal comparison made it harder to separate from the chronology. The first record used recording as part of the interference description. The contemporaneous call referred directly to stopping the recording. The later supplement shifted toward device position. The later clarification shifted again toward overall scene safety. Mariana stopped typing. She returned to the commercial intake record from Jonah Wells. His service form documented the phone model, serial number, housing damage, and the time Alicia brought the device into the shop. The intake photos showed compression damage to the phone. They did not show how the damage happened. Marianne wrote exactly that. The repair record could establish condition and timing. It could not establish motive, policy basis, or the sequence of physical contact on the roadside. That limit stayed in the memorandum. Alicia's formal statement was shorter than the other materials. She said Halpern directed her to a position beside the Camry. She stood there. She announced before retrieving the phone. She held it at chest height. She asked what part of the recording was interfering. She did not describe herself moving toward Halpern after that question. She did not add a legal argument. She did not describe what she believed he intended. When Marianne got to the phone damage, Alicia listed the sequence and stopped. The statement did not need anything else. Halpern received the same comparison memorandum with the draft factual section removed. He was given an opportunity to respond to the source records before a disposition was prepared. His written response arrived 2 business days later. He said the stop had to be viewed under the totality of the circumstances. He wrote that his concern had been maintaining control of the working area. He added that individual sentences from the roadside should not be separated from the broader safety context. Marianne read the response twice. She added one question beneath it. Separate observable obstructive act identified? The answer space remained blank. She sent Halpern a narrow follow-up request, asking him to identify the act he wanted the administrative reviewer to treat as separate from Alicia's decision to record. His response referred again to the phone being directed toward his working space. It did not add a step forward. It did not add blocked movement. Marianne entered the response in the second column. The third column stayed unchanged. Colby Sayers' certification note came last. He had approved the original report. He had not witnessed the stop. He had not independently verified the disputed behavioral wording before approval. He had declined to certify that wording from personal knowledge. The approval still existed. Its meaning had changed. Marianne completed the factual section of the disposition memorandum. She did not write that Halpern had lied. She did not assign a motive. She wrote one sentence. The available records do not identify a separate observable, obstructive act supporting the classification of Benton's recording as interference. That omission applies to the time when the classification was made. Under it, she listed the sequence: initial report, contemporaneous Northlake recording, later safety supplement, later terminology clarification, supervisory non-certification, active policy. The memorandum did not decide discipline. It did not order reimbursement. It did not correct Alicia's record by itself. Those decisions belonged to the next level. Marianne attached the source index and locked the comparison section against further editing by the originating patrol unit. She then submitted the draft disposition for administrative approval. The case number remained unchanged. On the approval screen, one old field was still visible. It was grayed out. The traffic contact file changed status before Alicia Benton received the written finding. Marianne Holt saw the update on her monitor shortly after the administrative approval was entered. The disposition field no longer read pending review. It read sustained in part record correction required. The signed finding was attached beneath it. Marianne opened the document and checked the sentence that had carried forward from the comparison memorandum. Alicia Benton's act of recording was treated as interference without a separately documented obstructive act supporting that classification. The sentence had not been expanded into a broader judgment about the traffic stop. It did not assign motive. It addressed the first procedural break. That was enough to change several records at once. The original interference notation was not deleted. The system preserved the entry because it had already been used in complaint screening and supervisory review. A correction banner was attached to it instead, superseded by administrative finding. Anyone opening the incident after that point would see the original wording and the finding together. The audit trail remained intact. The disputed traffic citation was withdrawn through the same administrative disposition. The notice did not say the original stop had never occurred. It said the citation would not be pursued following review of the incident record. Alicia received both notices through the complaint portal that afternoon. She read the correction first. Then she downloaded it. She did not send Marianne a statement about Halpern. Her reply contained one question. Does the correction remain linked to the original report? Yes. Alicia saved that response with the disposition. The financial portion moved separately. Jonah Wells's service intake established when the damaged phone entered the repair shop and documented its condition. Alicia's replacement receipt established the amount she had paid, the medical evaluation, and documented work interruption were already in the reimbursement file. Redstone Municipal Risk Cooperative approved the covered portions of the claim. The payment was not described as damages for every allegation Alicia had raised. It reimbursed the documented replacement cost, the medical evaluation, and the work time supported by her records. The broken phone remained broken. Personnel Administration handled Halpern's side of the disposition. His patrol authority was restricted, while that process remained active. He could not conduct solo traffic contacts, and his take-home vehicle assignment was removed. His eligibility for traffic overtime ended with the restriction. The department placed him on unpaid suspension during the formal personnel stage. None of those entries required Alicia to attend another interview. Halpern used the grievance process available to him. His representative challenged the level of discipline and argued that traffic stops required officers to make rapid safety judgments that could not always be reconstructed from later paperwork. The grievance did not erase the administrative finding. The factual section was already locked. The question had moved from what the record supported. It was now about what employment consequences would follow. Several weeks later, the department issued its proposed return conditions. Halpern would not return to unrestricted patrol. The proposed assignment was permanent non-patrol work, with no solo traffic contact authority. His take-home unit would not be restored, and traffic overtime would remain unavailable. He could accept the assignment or continue the personnel challenge. He chose a negotiated separation. The agreement resolved his employment status. It did not remove the sustained finding from the personnel file. That distinction appeared in the final notice. Marianne closed the personnel attachment after confirming the case number matched Alicia's complaint. She did not add another narrative. The employee could leave. The record stayed. Redstone's loss control review created a different set of consequences. Gavin Burke had not been asked to decide whether Halpern should remain employed. His file addressed municipal exposure. It outlined the controls Redstone required before it would treat the incident as closed from a risk management standpoint. The final directive contained several conditions. Complaints claiming interference because a civilian was recording would not be eligible for patrol chain closure without an independent review. If an officer classified recording as interference, the incident record had to identify a separate, observable, obstructive act. A damaged property claim tied to the same contact had to carry the same incident reference as the misconduct complaint. That prevented the two files from moving through unrelated review paths. Redstone also adjusted the municipality's annual liability contribution until the required controls were implemented and verified. No dramatic figure appeared in the directive. The cost showed up where municipal costs usually showed up. In the next budget adjustment, Chief Martin Gable received the Redstone notice with the administrative finding attached. He reviewed the conditions with the city finance office. He signed the adjustment request required to absorb the increased liability contribution. The form had a small field for explanation. Gable entered a short line. Loss control conditions following sustained traffic contact review. He signed beneath it. The department issued an internal memo implementing the changes. The memo did not mention Alicia's race. It did not use Halpern's name in the training section. It changed the required documentation. Recording alone could not be entered as interference without a separately described act showing how the person had obstructed the contact. The complaint routing rule changed with it. Marianne saw the final policy acknowledgement enter the case file several days later. Redstone marked the first implementation requirement complete and left the audit condition open for later verification. Alicia received the final disposition package that same week. The portal contained the correction notice, citation, withdrawal, reimbursement determination, and written finding. She opened the incident record one more time. The word interference was still there. Directly beneath it was the correction. It had lost the ability to stand alone. Across town, Gavin opened the municipal risk file and attached the signed implementation memo. The wording that had started as one officer's description of a woman holding a phone now appeared under a different heading. Jonah Wells set Alicia Benton's damaged phone on the service counter with the screen facing up. The glass had been replaced with a clear protective sleeve after the intake photos were taken. Nothing beneath it had improved. The housing was still compressed along one side. The display remained dark, and the frame no longer sat flat against the counter. Jonah turned it once with 2 fingers. The board damage makes repair hard to justify. Alicia looked at the phone. Can the data be recovered? Maybe some of it. But if you already replaced the device and you have what you need, I wouldn't put more money into this one. He slid the original intake sheet beside it. The serial number matched the number Jonah had recorded when Alicia first brought the phone in. The condition notes were unchanged. The photographs remained attached to the service record. Alicia signed the property release line. Jonah placed the phone in a small padded envelope and handed it across the counter. Nothing else was pending there. The repair shop had already done the work it could do. At Northlake Assurance Group, Alicia's replacement phone sat beside her laptop during the afternoon compliance meeting. It had a plain black case and no visible damage. Rachel Kemp was 2 desks away, working through a routine claim escalation with a regional analyst. This call may be recorded for compliance and quality purposes. The same announcement came through her headset before the analyst began speaking. Rachel clicked into the claim file and started typing. She did not look toward Alicia. Alicia opened her own work queue. The roadside call was no longer under an active preservation request. After the municipal disposition became final, Northlake Records staff had released the special hold and returned the recording to the company's normal retention schedule. The call had not been deleted. Its entry still showed Rachel as the Northlake employee on the line and Alicia as the connected participant. The call identifier remained the same one Rachel had preserved the morning after the traffic stop. Alicia did not open the audio. She had heard it enough during the review. The record showed the retention status. That was all she needed from it. Her complaint portal showed a similar kind of finality. The incident was closed. The original interference entry remained visible because the department had preserved the audit trail. Directly below it, the administrative correction was still linked, superseded by administrative finding. The finding remained accessible through the same incident reference. The correction did not remove the roadside stop from the system. It changed what the system said could be relied upon. Alicia closed the portal. Her reimbursement had already posted. The citation was no longer active. No further interview had been requested. The department had completed the required policy implementation, but the Redstone loss control condition remained open until the next scheduled audit confirmed that the new complaint routing and documentation requirements were actually being used. The final municipal notice contained one short status line: implementation complete, verification pending. That line stayed in the file. There was nothing for Alicia to answer. She returned to her work. Near the end of the day, Northlake Facilities sent a routine reminder about the scheduled electronics collection. The company used a secured cabinet near the service corridor for phones, small batteries, and other devices waiting for the contracted recycling vendor. Employees could place personal electronics there after removing anything they intended to keep. Alicia read the notice once. The padded envelope from Jonah's shop was still inside her tote. She finished the claim note on her screen before closing the laptop. Rachel ended her call nearby, entered the final disposition code, and moved to the next item in her queue. Alicia stood, picked up the tote, and walked toward the service corridor. The electronics cabinet was beside a gray supply closet. A printed sheet on the front listed the accepted items. Phones were on the list. Alicia opened the padded envelope. The damaged phone slid into her palm. For months, the device had moved through different systems without changing much. It had been photographed at the repair counter. Its serial number had entered a commercial service record. Its replacement cost had entered a reimbursement file. The damage was listed in a civilian complaint. It also appeared in a municipal liability review. It had never come back to life. Alicia flipped it. The back still carried a shallow pressure mark near the lower edge. She removed the old SIM card tray. She checked the envelope again for the small paper receipt Jonah had given her. She kept the receipt. The phone stayed in her hand. Alicia opened the recycling cabinet. Inside were several old charging cables and 2 tablets in protective sleeves. A small cardboard box was marked for battery handling. She placed the phone in the device bin. The cabinet door closed with a metal latch. She did not take a picture. Back at her desk, the replacement phone sat beside the laptop. It was where she had left it. A Northlake compliance notification popped up on the computer screen. A routine claim review was scheduled for the next morning. Alicia opened the file and checked the first document. Across town, the Hollis Ridge incident record still carried the administrative correction. Redstone's audit condition was still active. North Lake's retention system still carried the roadside call under its ordinary schedule. No one needed the broken handset to keep those entries in place. The phone went into electronics recycling. The call record stayed. This story is fictional.